Welcome, everybody. We are so delighted that you are joining us today to join us for the very first webinar town hall organized by PeaceHealth Center for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access. And today we are doing a town hall to celebrate Women's History Month. And our topic today is specifically going to be about women's well-being during the pandemic. We are so excited you are with us today. My name is Riikka Salonen, and I am a system director for external diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I will be your moderator today during the panel. We are so excited to have such a wonderful panel with us today to talk about this very important issue of women's well-being during the pandemic time and share their professional and personal experiences with you. Couple of housekeeping items. During the webinar, you are welcome to bring questions to the wonderful panelists, and you can do so by clicking the Q&A button and post your questions there on that list. And then we have a moderator behind the scenes to publish those questions. We probably won't be able to get through all of the questions today, but we are going to create a frequently asked questions list that we are going to share with the recording of this session after the fact. So if you have any specific questions related to how we can improve the well-being of women at PeaceHealth, please post those questions for us. Today we won't have the chat function on, so please share your question through that Q&A button. So it's my honor and privilege to introduce our Executive Vice President for People and Culture, Jolene Traynor. And Jolene is going to share with us this afternoon her reflection and give us a little bit more context why we are having this conversation right now and what are her insights around that topic. So Jolene, welcome and thank you for your kindness today.
Thank you, Riikka, and I am thrilled to be here with all of you. As I was looking to our reflection and what would we post for our reflection today, two items called out to me. Well, first one, this did, which you see here. And I think this proverb really calls to my heart as we think about women in healthcare and the role of women, period. We know that with COVID, there has been a disproportional impact on women and the implications economically as contributors to the household, caring for elder parents, children, and everything else in between. And so when I see this quote, it often reminds me of what I need to tell myself, right? That she is clothed in strength and dignity, and she laughs without fear of the future, right? And, you know, just having that surrounding grace of where we're going as an organization that is made up primarily of women. And when you think about healthcare, which is made up primarily of women, and when we think about our organization that is over 130 years old, that was started by who? Can I say it? Women, right? This is so completely near and dear to who we are. And so having a access group, right? A community access group, a community affinity group that brings us together to talk about how we are addressing issues in healthcare that women are facing. How are we helping our women caregivers navigate their careers? How are we identifying opportunities to polish their skills? How are we encouraging advancement and thinking about life beyond PeaceHealth, whether it be at home, in school, whatever that may be. I sit here before you, but for the investments of others in me. And I cannot help but also make that same contribution. So for the reflection, what I'd ask is that you just kind of center yourself. We're going to have a great, I think, discussion with our panelists in this topic around women's well-being during the pandemic. How are we caring for ourselves, our families, and each other? I wanted to start with this reflection. This reflection is by Nikita Gill. If you don't know her, she's an amazing young poet who has done some wonderful things, 5 books. She was born in Belfast to Indian parents, raised in New Delhi, now lives in London, and she's a prolific poster on Instagram. They call her an Insta poet. And you will find this young 33-year-old woman to be amazingly profound. So let me start. Do not tell me that girls cannot change the world. I grew on stories of a 12-year-old Anne Frank in a cramped, silent room, weaving hopeful magic with just the pen. And Ruby Bridges facing racist monsters when she was only 6, to become the first African-American child to desegregate an all-white school. And Ananda Gopal Joshi, only 19 years old and the first woman doctor of India. And Mary Shelley, changing the face of fiction forever by inventing a whole new genre at 18. I grew up on tales of girls fighting destiny, carving history with their own 2 hands, breaking down walls. So if my daughter ever doubts herself because she was told she cannot, I will hand her stories as a sword and faith as a shield, and I will tell her, you know what? They told Anne and Ruby and Anandi and Mary they couldn't too. And it didn't stop them, because nothing can stop a girl with eyes aflame, with courage and a war song in her chest. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Rika.
Thank you so much, Jolene. What a beautiful reflection you shared with us today, and just giving us hope of the future is for young women. There is so much that has been said about investing in girls and investing in education and opportunities. And today we are having conversation of how are our women doing as they are getting through this year of pandemic and many other issues in our society. So we will talk about that. So next, I would like to introduce our delightful panelists. And our panelist is bringing together 3 highly experienced professional women who are making our organization better every day. So our first panelist is April Allen. April joined PeaceHealth 5-6 weeks ago and is already making incredible change in our organization. April is a system director for internal diversity, equity, and inclusion, and joined our team at the Center for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access, CIDEA. So welcome, April. Our next panelist is Dr. Camille Moreno. Dr. Moreno has joined our organization only 7 weeks ago and is now creating a beautiful system change by opening the PeaceHealth Cascade Park next week. She is the clinical manager for behavioral health and will tell more about her work in the context of culturally responsive behavioral health. And our last panelist is Mickey Warner. Mickey has been at PeaceHealth for many years and is currently the director of mission services in the Oregon network. And during this time of pandemic, Miki has been guiding our caregivers through these spiritual care services and offering hope and support for those who are experiencing distress in their work. So we will start with the panel. And the first question is going to April Allen. So April, we are bringing you to the full screen here. And this question is for you. How has this year of double pandemic with COVID-19 and this racism impacting our society, how has that impacted particularly women of color? And what can we do to ensure equity during this hard time?
Wow. Thank you for the question, Rika. Can you hear me? I just want to make sure clearly.
We can hear you beautifully. Yes.
Okay. Awesome. No, that's a good question. It's a loaded question. You know, one thing I've been saying since the after the pandemic and then after June, when the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery came to light, I have been saying, you know, we're all on choppy waters, but we're not all in the same boat. So we're all on less than desirable waters. No, nobody wishes this on themselves, but some of our boats are a little bit different, and some of them are a little better, and some of them are worse. And so it's I will be very, you know, candid. It's definitely taken its toll on myself and other women of color, Black women that I have spoken to and been in contact with. You know, we know that racism has been a challenge, and I'll be careful about my language, since the inception of the country, and so that is not new to women of color and people of color, and Black folks. So we've had that adverse impact on us, but then you added the pandemic and you saw even greater adverse impact. And what I have found so troubling is that economically, women of color have been affected, even the more so, which is not shocking. I hate to say that, but their rates, even now as we are experiencing some economic upswing, their rates of unemployment are still higher than white women, white men, and even Black men. So they're about 9.7%, 10%, and that is about double of what other people's are, in the categories I listed. And so what you find is the exhaustion that has set in to so many women of color, because they are primary caretakers. There's a lot of single family homes or one parent homes, and they have children at home. And I will speak from my own experience, because I think this is the best way to kind of understand the reality and have more empathy for the situation. I know I'm a mother, as you hear me say, of a 5 and an 8-year-old, 2 beautiful little brown girls, a Chloe and a Ella. I call them my lady babies. And these lady babies keep me busy, but also in the field of DEI, I've been kept very busy, as you would know, Rika. Anybody who was a DEI practitioner had felt the burnout when COVID started hitting, and then the social justice uprising in June. And so that was challenging, because, and I can't even convey how challenging that was, because by the time I had hit August, I had felt a burnout I had never felt, and I felt detached. And that scared me because anybody who knows me knows I emote, have lots of emotions, have lots of feelings, maybe too many feelings, if you ask my husband, but I have lots of feelings and emotions, and and I felt a detachment, and it concerned me because I wondered, I said, wow, is this what people feel like if they're depressed? Because I had started feeling those mental health challenges and like I had never experienced before. And to lead up to that, imagine working, 60, 70-hour weeks easily, trying to keep all the plates spinning while you're dealing with the impacts of racism on myself, such as dealing with microaggressions from people at work saying, well, why are we even dealing with this? Or here Black folks are making an issue about something that really doesn't have to be that big of an issue, it was just one incident, or I don't, and so you're dealing with all that stuff psychologically, but then you're also dealing with the lives of two little kids who you're explaining to them what it means to be Black in America. And that was a conversation I wasn't prepared to yet have with the 5 and 8-year-old, not in totality. I was still kind of saying, obviously they learn about Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and Ruby Bridges and all the different things I've taught them or schools are teaching them. But to sit there, and I remember a distinct day in the end of June, and we were on a walk and we were at the waterfront here in Vancouver, and my daughter said, what is happening, right? She was my 7-year-old at the time, said, what is happening and what does racism really mean? And I had given her the high level definitions, but I had to tell her the very a definition that I didn't think she was prepared to hear just yet. I had not prepared to give. And so with that being said, the toll that took on me and the thing and how she felt, and she had to work through the fear of being a little Black girl in a country that's her country. And what hit me was how generational it was. My mom had this conversation with me, her mom had this conversation with her, and her mom's mom had the conversation with her. They just looked a little bit more nuanced, as my mom grew up in South Carolina. But it was like, this is sad. And so the totality of that has been stressful on one hand. And then on the other side, the pandemic side, a lot of us know people in our communities. I know people who have died from COVID. So when you hear flippant conversations or comments about, well, why are we doing all this? And I dealt with that a lot. Well, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, well, it may not matter to you to wear a mask or why we're not coming into the office, but this is a reality to our communities and to a lot of our family members or friends that we may know are church members that are frontline workers and that are putting themselves at risk. And so it's very nuanced, and I wanted to give you a very pretty packaged answer, but it wasn't, because it's one that causes a lot of emotions, and it's a little bit more cumbersome than saying these are the 2 points. But I think the stress of it has been very real. Losing people has been very real for people in my community, and not just from the pandemic, but also from the violence experienced at times in my community, and then the discussions that you're having that you don't want to have with so many with children. And even with the children's teachers and things, to try to make sure that they are also protecting your child's mental health. So it's very nuanced, but it's been a challenge, Rika. It's been a challenge.
Thank you so much, April, for sharing your personal experience with us. And I so appreciate your openness to share the stories of being a mother, balancing that. While doing this so important work for advancing justice in our society and in our organization. So I appreciate you so much. I would like to turn the next question to Dr. Moreno. And Dr. Moreno, as you are a behavioral health clinician, I was wanting to ask you, what have you seen in the community among your clients, around the people you serve, during this time of pandemic? What are some of the issues that are popping up, and what guidance have you given to your clients during this hard time?
Thank you, Rika, and thank you for having me as part of the panelists today. I feel very honored to be among such powerful individuals, and just listening to April is so inspiring. Before I start to answer your question, I just want to pay homage to the people on whose land, the people whose land we occupy, the Cowlitz people. I think it is important for us to center ourselves and really think about the struggles of people before us, and the struggles they experienced while we occupied their land. So having said that, to answer your question specifically, identifying specific cultural, sex, and gender differences is fundamental to inform targeted psychological interventions all the time. And that has been especially true during this time of the pandemic. Women have reported to me, and I think, when I talk to my colleagues, women have been reporting more sleep trouble, more symptoms of anxiety and depression, and greater empathy for others as they struggle. They're also reporting the empathy that they feel for others as they're witness to the experiences that all human beings around the world have been experiencing during this pandemic. Some of the risk factors for the women that I work with, include chronic environmental strain, like the expectations of women as caretakers of children and the elderly, and cultural gender roles expectations, as was previously mentioned before by Jolene and by April. And then we have women with pre-existing depressive and anxiety disorders that create additional risk during this time of the pandemic. And I work with survivors of domestic violence, and I've been working with that community for a little over 25 years. And during the time of the pandemic, I have been witness to just how compounding, the existing risk factor of being in relationships where there's interpersonal violence, and coupling that with the pandemic just really complicates things for survivors and women who are in the midst of relationships where there is domestic violence. I also work with women who are considering becoming pregnant, who are pregnant. So I work with women during the perinatal and during pregnancy and postpartum period. And the pandemic-related stressors specific to reproductive functioning have included like new barriers to contraception. It's harder to get to your provider because of decreased office hours, because there have been cancellations of procedures for birth control to prioritize, only absolutely necessary procedures. And then the fear of the possible impacts of COVID-19 on the developing fetus if they were to become pregnant. The perinatal period is a time of really high vulnerability to mental health problems in the best of circumstances. For example, it has been reported that 1 in every 7 perinatal women experience increased anxiety, depression, and distress. Well, the risk is even higher among women experiencing a medically high-risk pregnancy. And during COVID-19, the additional stressors have included, I've heard, my patients ask questions like, am I more vulnerable to COVID-19 infection while I'm pregnant? Can COVID-19 be transmitted to my baby? Does COVID-19 increase the risk of pregnancy complications? And for other of my patients, they've experienced decisional stress. So, for example, they're kind of grappling with the question: should I skip prenatal care visits to decrease the risk of exposure of COVID-19? Should I be going to a hospital or to a clinic or to a doctor's office when we have shelter in place, orders, and I want to stay safe? Should I deliver at home instead of at a hospital? Will that increase my safety? Then there's the stress that comes with how care is delivered. Care kind of quickly transitioned to virtual visits, and then and even when you have in-person visits, you can't have anyone join you during those visits. And then the idea of wearing masks that really depersonalizes very intimate visits with care providers when you're going to visit your OB. And then what I've heard during the postpartum period has had its own worries. And I have a sister-in-law that was pregnant during the time of the pandemic, and then had her baby. And some of the worries, not only of my patients, but also my sister-in-law voiced this too. She was really worried about whether her newborn would be vulnerable to COVID-19, and really didn't want to was really worried about like making sure she has wanted to have a healthy delivery and a healthy baby, because she didn't want to extend the amount of time that they were in the hospital. And then there's the worry of, can I hold my baby close to me? Is COVID-19 transmitted through breast milk? What if I have COVID and I don't know because I don't have symptoms? Can I possibly give this to my baby? And then, the struggles my patients talked about, their relatives couldn't come over to support them, couldn't be there for the baby, couldn't support the family because they were ensuring that, that they practiced physical distancing. And then, for a couple of my patients too, the talk of like, how do I support my baby now that I am unemployed? And sometimes the unemployment was due to COVID-19. Then beyond that, then the stressors that come with parenting during the time of a pandemic, where parents were reporting feeling more anxious, more agitated, fearful, and depressed due to limited financial resources, and then for some of them the unemployment, just a general sense of unpredictability and loss of control from trying to homeschool and to do remote work with really limited help. And then this is magnified for single mothers and mothers with limited abilities, even more so. Like I said, I've worked in the domestic violence field for a really long time, and this is one of the areas where I felt myself also feeling really worried and scared for some of my patients, because with regards to intimate partner violence, the whole world was told to stay at home, and for many women, home represents the least safe option. So sheltering in place was very scary for these women and for my patients. And so, women experiencing IPV during COVID have had greater exposure to perpetrators of violence. They're at home with the person who is abusing them. And violence in the home is linked to depression and post-traumatic stress. So now we're in a time when that is even further compounded and complicated. Because during COVID-19, like I've said, when, all of us and women have had decreased access to support systems, to social supports, and to resources. I was reading and listening to the news the other day, you know, the United Nations reported a horrifying surge in domestic violence since the beginning of the pandemic, and in fact are calling all of us to action, and are, you know, and asking, and I join them in asking that, you know, all of our responses to COVID-19 and the plans that we put in place include the prevention and the redress of violence against women. Sheltering in place and social distancing, like I said, have left many victims deprived of the option to shelter with a friend or to go to a DV shelter. And so as providers, we must be vigilant and in recognizing signs of domestic violence. And, you know, and always we should feel comfortable asking about IPV and learn, if we don't know how, learn how to do that respectfully, and only in ways that maximize safety for you know, for our clients or our patients. Should I stop?
Oh, Dr. Moreno, your insights are so powerful, and it paints such a painful picture of what's going on in the lives of so many women during this time of pandemic. And I appreciate your broad viewpoint around what all is going on. It certainly puts my life into perspective. During this time of COVID, I have been battling depression, but I am so blessed that many of the other circumstances are not applying in my case, understanding also how the white privilege that I have, the white advantage, is impacting me and benefiting me during this time. So thank you for your insight. I would love to transfer our conversation to our spirit and our soul during this time. And Miki, as you are leading a spiritual care team, you have been seeing so many of our caregivers during this time when you and your team members have been offering spiritual care support. Could you talk about that experience and what kind of support has your team been offering to our caregivers?
Thank you, Rika. Yes, I've been listening to the conversation. I've really found myself reflecting on what the journey of the last year has been for our chaplain teams in particular. And I think in many ways, the most important thing our teams have done is gone through this journey alongside the caregivers we work with. So whether it be a hospital unit or a geographic team with hospice, our chaplains really work alongside our caregivers every day. And I usually call it bearing witness. We bear witness to the stresses and strains and the burdens of the work our clinical caregivers do. And honestly, this has been a year where our team is experiencing exactly the same stresses and strains in terms of having to really, in many ways, rethink the work we do, because chaplains tend to be people who, I know when I pray with patients, my tendency is to reach out and put a hand on a shoulder. So we're close, we hug, we touch, we share food. And so many of the ways, like Tea for the Soul, that we would so naturally, before the pandemic, offer care and support to our caregivers in those small moments of connection, were suddenly taken away from us. And so I think there was a time when many of us early in the pandemic felt a little adrift in terms of how do I do what I do in a meaningful way, even thinking about how I connect non-verbally in a patient visit when I'm wearing a mask, and when the natural impulse is to reach out and hug a family member or touch a patient's shoulder, and we're keeping some distance. So I think so many of the themes of the last year have been around how do we maintain connection and community in a meaningful way when we need to stay separated for the safety of not only our coworkers and our patients, but also our families at home. So I think that how we're protecting our bubbles has been part of the conversation as well. And that's where I feel such an affinity with everything that's been shared from my colleagues on the panel, because I think caregivers tend to be the ones who are caring for elderly parents at home or in their community. We're connecting with our neighbors. We're helping our children through these experiences. One of my most powerful conversations with one of my coworkers in mission and spiritual care, who has 2 teenage children, was reflecting last spring on the fact that most of the challenges her children have had to face in life are ones she's already gone through at earlier points in her life. And how does she help her children make sense of being separated from their friends and their community and their activities when she herself is coping with the same sense of separation. And so, you know, through the journey of the last year, I think, like many of us, our chaplains and spiritual care providers have really found that a phone visit, a virtual visit, is a powerful way to connect. We've learned to use tools that, quite honestly, I think we were resistant to at earlier times. And I think we found ways to offer the virtual prayer groups, to take a mindfulness class and find a way to do that on Zoom or on Teams, and really get to the heart of what we do in terms of connection and relationship, and maintain those connections over the course of the last year. And I think going forward, what I see emerging is a really powerful conversation about that intersection of caregiver engagement and caregiver health and wellness. And I think also, you know, just this week, hearing a recent Gallup poll that now measures faith community membership among Americans at 47%. So for the first time, membership in a formal faith community is below 47%, or is below 50%. And it got me thinking today about what that means in terms of spiritual care's role in tending to the soul, and to that notion of mind, body, spirit, and holistic care in a culture that is increasingly not seeking that out in a formal faith community. But how do we really tend to the soul of individuals and remind people and hold that space that Sister Kathleen would remind us is the spark of the divine that is alive in each of us, and what is spiritual care's role in acknowledging that, intending that, and helping people put a frame and a structure around that that's meaningful to them in their lives as we begin to form communities of soul in new ways going forward.
Thank you so much, Mickey. What an insightful answer. And before we switch out of you, I wanted to ask if there's a caregiver out there who is listening today or watching this video later on, how can they connect with our spiritual care team if they want to talk with somebody about how they are doing, how they are holding up?
Yeah, in all of our communities, especially where we have the acute care hospitals, we always have a chaplain on call or in-house. I think of it as the on-duty chaplain. And so we understand our work to be with patient families, and also our caregivers. And so I would encourage any caregiver who would like to connect with one of the chaplains to call the hospital operator and ask to have the chaplain on duty paged. We always are available for those conversations, and on our system mission and spiritual care website, we have the contact information for all of the communities published.
Oh, thank you so much, Mickey.
Yeah.
So we are going to shift our next question back to Jolene. And Jolene, if you could tell and talk to us about what can leaders do during this time to support their female caregivers, particularly those who have children caring for aging parents?
I think there's a variety of things, but first and foremost is check in, right? When we talk about wanting to solve some of these issues, we often think about these big programmatic approaches, and we can just stop for a minute and connect with people. You'll hear me say over and over again, the single most powerful thing in an organization before structure, roles, titles is relationships. And forming relationships with our colleagues, just checking in and listening, really listening to how they're feeling, what they're experiencing, and how you might be of service, I think is critically important. We're all putting on a brave face, right? And coming to work, and we are focused and we are dedicated, and you have no idea what's going on underneath the surface. And sometimes in those quiet moments when you're walking down a hall, or when you stop and you see someone, just really asking them, how are you? How is your family? And then waiting for that real response. And maybe just even asking again when they say, oh, we're fine, everything's fine. Oh, really? Tell me what fine looks like in your household. I can tell you what it looks like in mine. I'm not sure you want to know, but right. And even it's that adding a little bit of laughter, opening up the door. I think that is so important. And then you can determine how to help, right? Whether it's saying, maybe you need to take a little bit of time off. Maybe we should think about a different schedule. Maybe there's a lot of different maybes that may come forward. But I think the first and foremost important thing is relationships. It's when our people come to us that it's finally probably reached a breaking point, right? And if we can get ahead of it before they reach a breaking point, I think that's the most important thing. And we're all resourceful. I mean, my goodness, look at how resourceful we've been during COVID. We've been so resourceful. It's allowing an opportunity to get ahead of it and be resourceful in advance, then stepping into crisis when too much has happened. And now, right, we're just trying to survive. So I ask all of you, look out for one another, connect with one another, really, truly ask how one another is doing. Try to fill up someone's cup. And, in return, often you get your cup filled up too. I think those are the important things that I would see as we care for each other and navigate, the winding road ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Jolene, so much. So insightful. And as you were talking about how does one fill one's own cup, I have a question for all of the panelists. How have you been taking care of yourself during this time of pandemic? Because as we are the caregivers of the caregivers, it is really hard to give if there is nothing left. So April, I'm going to go first to you and ask, how are you taking care of yourself during this time?
Thank you, Rika. Well, there's a few things I try to practice. I would say one, every morning, well, let me be honest, maybe most mornings. I don't want to say every morning because some mornings I sleep in, but most mornings I get up and I pray and I meditate. And that is a practice that has just been in my life before the pandemic, but it's only intensified during the pandemic because I realized my reliance on it's not on myself, it's on God. And I can't do this. And so that is something that I'm up. If that's at 5 in the morning, I have to get up and do it, that I will do it because it gets me through the day and it keeps me focused and centered on grace for the day. I have grace for the day. And it may not be pretty sometimes. It's you come in my house and it's a hotmess.com, as I like to say some days, but we have grace for the day to keep moving. You may have a Cheerio stuck to your foot, but you keep going. Another thing I do is I personally, physically, I work out. Now, everybody has, I know some people say that's a luxury, and it is to some degree. And during this time especially for working mothers, but for me, that's how I prioritize myself. And in this sense, because I know that this is important for me to stay healthy so I can take care of a family. So I can stay sane. I need to get them endorphins up early. So I go out, I try to work out and get going so I can keep going. Also, I'm looking at warding off things like diabetes and other hypertension, things that affect my community in disproportionate rates. And then the other thing I would say I do is I put up boundaries. Now, that's always interesting. I'm not one that lacks words usually, but I've had to learn even in work settings, to be totally candid, to put up the boundaries because people don't know what they don't know. And the reality is we all can be self-centered and think about how things are affecting us in our agenda and our timeline. But I've been very vocal about saying to whether it's the person I report into, to team members, people I work with, these are kind of my boundaries. My family is first. I just come out the gate. That's my first job, my first love. That's what I care about. Priority wise, I love what I do, but I have to prioritize that. And then I make sure, if I don't need to be somewhere, I ask, please don't make me be there. Not because I'm a party pooper or I don't want to be a part necessarily. It's because it's not the best use of my time. And I don't have that much time in the day. And so those are things that I personally do. And I know when you even asked me the first question, and I really didn't, I took everybody on a story about equity, but to me, that's part of also equity. How do we practice equity in the workplaces? One suggestion I always have, is being flexible. Because the reality is when you are a mom with children, you can't keep a job if it's not a flexible place. And that doesn't mean there's not requirements and expectations, but there has to be that flexibility and that respect of the person's life. And the pandemic's only increased that. I mean, I think about, I didn't even touch on when you are trying to handle the kids' schooling and you're just like, I don't know this new math. I know you're 7, but why are they teaching you this way? You're like, this is not how you do something, and the stress of that, or seeing your child be overwhelmed and anxious because they're online and they're not connecting with people, and they are a connector, and that stress that took on you. And as a Black mother, then I'll shut it, is that, one thing that I had to advocate for was, and this was something that was happening at the job I had before me. A lot of Black women were coming to me and they were in tears and they were saying, they don't understand my education, my child. If they are not educated, they don't have a chance in this country. Like, this is it. So I take this serious. And so one thing I try to convey to people is my education is serious in this household. It is a serious thing. So mom shows up at the school. Mom is, hand holding some more than some people feel comfortable. I had a lot of my white friends and we had discussion about this. Oh, it's fine. They'll be fine. They'll catch up. And I'm saying, no, by 4th grade, statistics are showing, right? If there's that gap, my kids are in trouble, and then they are written off as trouble kids and problems and have learning disabilities put on them that they may not even have. And so I have a sense of urgency that some people may not understand. So so those are ways I'm taking care of myself, and those are some of the challenges that I have to overcome. But
oh, thank you so much, April. I so appreciate you sharing your story and also those excellent ideas for others to apply. I mean, stewardship is one of our core values. And like you often say, we have to be stewards of our own time. Nobody else is going to come to our rescue. Dr. Moreno, I would like to turn to you next and ask, how do you take care of yourself?
I love this question. I really appreciate that you included this, because for people of color, radical self-love and self-care is liberation, because we have been conditioned to work and to work and to work, and because there's a period in our lives when that was you wouldn't survive, literally wouldn't survive if you didn't do what the master said you needed to do. So, caring for the self is liberation. I take that very seriously. So I have committed very seriously to my own psychological care. As a psychologist, I value very deeply my time with my own psychotherapist, and so that appointment I prioritize every week, and on the days that I have, and I guard it. Nothing can change that appointment. So I've done that to take care of myself during this time, and it's just my practice in general. And I have my child is grown. I have one child, and he's an adult who still leans on mommy. And I take a lot of pleasure in that. And so I refute the criticisms and the judgment around being there for my adult child in a way that dominant culture would perceive as inappropriate or enmeshed. I don't take that in. I connect very deeply with my one child, and for me, that is how I take care of myself as well. When I can care for my child, I am taking care of myself as a woman and as a mother. And then I have 2 small fur babies that I walk every morning, and that also is protected time. So if it means I will be 5 minutes late to the office, I will be 5 minutes late, because that walk is healing. And my connection to my fur babies is healing. So those are some of the things that I do to take care of myself.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moreno. We are now going to turn to Mickey and hear your insights about how you care for yourself.
Yeah, so I have quiet time every morning that I really treasure. It tends to be the one, whether it's half hour, 45 minutes, on the best days it's an hour. It tends to be my one time of true solitude during the day. And sometimes it's prayer, sometimes it's watching the sun come up, always coffee. And sometimes it's journaling, and journaling the I think I synthesize a lot of things in my sleep. So it's journaling the insights that I wake up with about the journey I'm on, and so that time I really treasure. And for me, especially in really stressful times, it's very easy for me to not eat well and kind of forget to tend to just my own needs for sleep and nutrition. So I think the really staying on a routine during this last year has been important in terms of it sounds kind of silly, but almost parenting myself, like, okay, it's time to go to bed. You need to drink more water. You cannot go without breakfast. Make time for that. And really tending, I've always thought about tending to the fundamentals as a really important way of staying in balance. And I've also had to really practice something that I've talked with caregivers about over the years, which is we all know those big things that fill up our bucket. So for me, when I most need to restore, it's getting outside, and it's not getting outside in small ways. It's camping, it's skiing, it's but we can't always rely on only doing those ultimate things that fill the bucket. So I have to know, what can I do if I only have 15 minutes, if I have half an hour? What do I do in constant, continuous, manageable ways to refill the bucket? So, finding those ways to get outside, take a walk, get the heart and soul, the best of what those big ultimate bucket fillers are, and do the most essential pieces of it when I have the time to. So.
Thank you, Mickey. And Jolene, you get to share with us. What do you do? I know you have fur babies. What else is filling your bucket, filling your soul?
Yes, I have 2 fur babies that occupy a lot of my time, and they're pretty crazy. I'm surprised you haven't heard them yet. But that being said, you know what I've been doing a lot of is connecting with the people that I love. I've been trying to very much intentionally focus on laughter. And trying to figure out ways I can work laughter into my day. I know that sounds a little nutty, but I do. Me and my sisters, I have 2 sisters, and they are just my twin souls, but we have a rolling text that goes on and on and on. And someday I'm going to turn that into a book because it is so funny. They are so witty and just amazing, crazy mothers, moms, sisters, Latinas, just wonderful, wonderful people. And so I try to do that. I think there's something very soothing about having a really great laugh. Or finding something joyful that makes your heart smile. There's so much, I think, negative press, news. We have challenges at work, and just finding that one opportunity at least once a day to have a chuckle. I recommend everybody go look at Bored Panda. They have the funniest and most bizarre things sometimes to look at that just, make you laugh. And I think, caring about, I know this sounds maybe a little, I don't know what the word is. You guys come up with it, but caring for our caregivers, I get a lot out of that personally, right? Thinking about solving problems for our people, because I know how much is on their plate. And it's not contrived. I mean, if any of you know me, I do spend a lot of my time talking with our people and trying to connect with them, and, where possible, making a difference. And that fills me up as well. But I think just in summary, gosh, we all need a little bit of laughter in our life, wherever it comes from. Our fur babies, our kids, cat videos, who knows what, but just a little bit of laughter does something for our souls. And so that's my advice.
Oh, thank you, Jolene, so much. Such great ideas, and how that laughter is healing our spirits and just giving us that little dopamine or serotonin boost. It's so important. So as we are coming to the end here, PeaceHealth has several caregiver affinity groups that are bringing together caregivers across a variety of departments and our different networks to connect and build community, build a sense of belonging, and address issues that are important for that group of caregivers. So we are in the process of starting a women's caregiver affinity group. And if you are interested in being a catalyst for change, addressing many of these issues that we have been talking today, tapping into topics of work-life balance or equity of pay or gender equity in general, please join us. We would love to hear from you. You can email at Caregiver Affinity Group, which is CAG@peacehealth.org, and then we will send you an invitation to the upcoming meeting. We are in the process of getting this started, and during the month of April, we would like to host a meeting for everybody who is interested in this topic. So thank you so much for participating to this panel today. We are so grateful for your interest, and we are grateful for your participation in listening, and of course, huge gratitude to all of our amazing panelists. Thank you for sharing a piece of your soul and spirit today with our caregiver community. And thank you for all of the great practical guidance that you shared with us, with our caregivers. So with that note, have a blessed day, and we will be in touch. And please join our Women's Caregiver Affinity Group. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you for having me. Bye.